On this Friday edition of the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara, we dive deep into the Cleveland Browns on bye week with the man himself, Tony Grossi, longtime analyst from ESPN Cleveland, and give you the fantasy football and NFL betting info you need with Steffi Smalls. That's coming up right now.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara. The sickest Cleveland Browns podcast.
Cut back by Chubb. He's to the 10. He's still running to the 5. He dips outside left. He's going in. Touchdown. What a run. Nick Chubb.
It's going to be sick.
With the Browns being at 3-5, with them having so much unknown, are they still in the race? Aren't they? Deshaun Watson come back. I had to go to the man. I had to go to the source, to the general of the 100 Years' War. And that man is Tony Grossi from ESPN Cleveland, who's been covering the Browns since 1984 and does a great job every single day for ESPN Cleveland and on the land, on demand. General, Mr. Grossi, how are you?
Pretty good, Andy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, hey, thank you for coming on. And this is a time that the team reflects. And Andrew Berry, the general manager, said, obviously they address their situations and everybody's studying film. So for fans, it's also a time for us to reflect. And I think, Tony, for me, through the first 8 games, the 2 words that pop to mind are missed opportunities. Because really, Tony, if you look at this team, should have 5. The record should at least be the other way around, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. Even if they had just beaten Baltimore two weeks ago, that Cincinnati game would have been for first place in the AFC North, and the Browns trounced the Bengals. So they have a lot of catching up to do now. I mean, they could have controlled things with their undefeated record in the division. As it is, they're 2-1, and Baltimore's kind of gained some separation. So they're not out of it, but they got a steep hill to climb.
Exactly. In Baltimore, the schedule on paper is one of the easiest in the whole league. So that's not good. The Bengals, we know, hey, it's eerily similar to a year ago, Tony, where the Browns trounced them. Denzel Ward had that 99-yard pick six. Then that flipped the switch and they went on to the Super Bowl. Steelers seem like they're an afterthought, but it's still in that sense for the Browns where, okay, you're 3-5. You still have a ways till Deshaun Watson comes back. Do you think they can tread water with their schedule coming to stay in this thing until Watson comes back?
Well, Jacoby Brissett has 3 more games to play: Miami, Tampa Bay, and Buffalo. And only the Tampa game is in Cleveland. I don't think that matters too much. If he could win 2 of them, they'd be in great shape. Winning 1 keeps them still in it, but puts a lot of pressure on Watson to virtually go 5-1 for them to have any chance. And they will definitely have to win. There were 3 remaining division games. And the problem with the Cincinnati game is they look done, especially after losing their cornerback. And Cleveland needs them not to be done because they play Baltimore in that final game of the year that, it could come down to something like that. Because I think the only way the Browns make the playoffs is by winning the division. And they can do it, but they're going to need help now from Cincinnati or Pittsburgh.
In conversation with Tony Grossi from ESPN Cleveland and thelandondemand.com on Twitter at Tony Grossi. And Tony, yeah, you said it, and you've been a big proponent with your articles on the Land on Demand of in this division with how close things are and that there's no real juggernaut. Winning the division and against your divisional opponents is so important. And the Browns have done that pretty well so far, but that continues to add up. And it's a case again where you look at it. Yeah, the Baltimore game should have happened. Pittsburgh looks like it's, their quarterback situations all up and down. And you look back to the Jets game and the Falcons. And even though that's not the division, boy, if you had those 2 with their division record, it just comes down to the in-game management, right?
Yeah, well, the Jets game was an all-time instant classic, terrible game. 13 points in a minute 33 or whatever it was. Oh. So, that's what losing that game and that's what losing The New England trounced them, but the Falcons game, as you said, was also another winnable game, and that's 5-3 there if they win those two games, and they're in good shape with 5-3 and 2-1 in the division. So they're going to have to need a lot of help now. It's still doable, but there's no room for error now for them.
Right. And we talk about Deshaun Watson, and you've written about it, and I'm in total agreement and of the same mindset. We can't just expect Deshaun Watson without playing in by the time he's at 700 days, 2 years, whatever number it is, to say, hey, I'm the same guy I was 2 years ago. In the preseason, we saw there is plenty of rust to shake off. So you could be at a point where you're ready to strike, but Deshaun Watson isn't. And so he's not just going to come like an angel from the sky and save this season.
No, fortunately for him, or maybe it's unfortunate to go back to Houston, but that's a very beatable team. His first game, and then you got to ramp up quickly for his 3 division games. He gets to play each of the 3 teams in the division, and then they also have Washington on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. So he's got to give them one game to get ready, and they should be able to beat Houston with Watson not at his best, but he's got to be at his best very quickly after that.
Right. And we'll see then, but even coming out of this bye going to Miami, Tony, we've all been screaming it, their shirts about run the damn ball. And Cincinnati, he did sort of, you still had a weird gadget play with Amari Cooper and whatever, but you ran it. And I started thinking, okay, that's what they did in week 1, that it worked. I like, what's your confidence level in Stefanski that he will continue to do that, where we've seen quite often some of the decision-making is baffling?
Yeah, Andy, I don't have confidence that he will continue to do it. That's the problem, especially when Watson comes back. I think it'd be like a new toy under the Christmas tree for him. And they didn't sign him for $230 million to have him hand off. That's why I think there's a conflict between what they really are and what they want to be. And what they want to be is they want to use this quarterback and to throw the ball. And I think it's the wrong way to go. But, they made the investment in him, and I don't think they're going to use him to hand off. So that's a conflict that remains to be seen how they're going to resolve it. But if they played like they did, very physical, like they did against Cincinnati, they could beat anybody. Yeah. And the key, but I mean, that's just the offense, though. I think the key to where they're going is the defense. If the defense continues to be, they've had 2 good games in a row, Baltimore and Cincinnati, and they're already tied for 6th in the league in scoring, averaging 25 points a game. They don't need to score 30 a game, let's say, to make the playoffs. They need the defense to pick itself up, and they need the special teams to stop making stupid mistakes. So that's totally out of Watson's hands. If he just does what Jacoby Brissett's doing, I mean, point-wise, they'll be fine.
In conversation with Tony Grossi from ESPN Cleveland and the landondemand.com. Tony, that's where I wanted to swing with you and look at this team at the bye week, because offensively, Nick Chubb leads the league in rushing, 841. We can make the argument he should be maybe closer to 1,000 already. But I want to focus on the defense and special teams with you, and you brought that up with the 2 good games. And we saw last year the Joe Woods defense, as the year went on, got better. Myles Garrett, 5th in the league in sacks right now at 7.5. And just that spin move was filthy. That was phenomenal. But we're seeing we're seeing the sloppy tackling, the linebacker question. And you brought this up quite a bit, and I'm with you. The light, speedy linebacker, which is cool analytics, in a video game, but in the big bad AFC North, maybe a little bit of size. That defense, what steps do you feel they have to take coming out of this bye? What do they have to work on to try to be more consistent like they have been the last 2 games?
Yeah. Well, I'd be fine if they kept Sione Takitaki as the middle linebacker.
Yeah. Good.
I don't think that's going to happen. He played because JOK Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah did not play. They've already lost Anthony Walker and Jacob Phillips. And the fact is, Takitaki is the biggest linebacker they have. He's not very big, but he's the biggest. And he's one of the best tacklers. And I think he made a big difference in that Cincinnati game. Now, what happens when JOK comes back? I think he goes back, to his spot, and that's a vulnerability there when he's on the 220-pound linebacker. We saw Atlanta and New England just key on him in the running game. So I don't know if the Browns would make the adjustment of keeping Taki, where he played or not. That's one of the things I'm looking at to see when they go to Miami. Now, Miami's not a team that runs the ball. So we're going to see their speedy little guys out there again, running around to defend the pass. My concern is when they play a team capable of running the ball, how they adjust to that.
Right. Yeah, with those lighter backers and Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle and company there, those lighter linebackers might serve well. The safety position has been a concern, and Grant Delpit was, a bit of a goat, and not the good kind, a couple games ago. And it seems like all the talent coming in, the defense was supposed to be sort of the strength to carry the offense a little bit under Jacoby Brissett, and it hasn't been that. But then the last two games, it sort of has at the safety position. And having to overcome some of those injuries, especially the Denzel Ward with the concussion, confidence level, your feel coming out of the bye from that safety spot.
Well, Delpit's been a big disappointment, I think.
Yeah.
He was the missing link who was going to really solidify the defense, both in the run defense and the pass, and he's been a concern. So they're not going to replace him with Ronnie Harrison. They're just not going to. Delpit's got to stay in position. One of the adjustments they made in the Cincinnati game was having John Johnson call the defensive signals because Deion Jones is new to the team. It used to be Anthony Walker's job. Jacob Phillips couldn't do it. So if they just let John Johnson continue to call the signals, I think that helps their communication and positioning everybody in place, But you're right, Delpit, the safety. I think John Johnson's been inconsistent, but he's had some good games. Delpit, I haven't seen much out of him this year, but bad.
Yeah, it's been real disappointment with some of the hype coming out. He had the Achilles and coming back. Okay, let's finish, Tony, with the special teams, or as you guys call it on ESPN Cleveland, the unspecial teams. Yeah. And boy, Cade York, that big old boot, it's tremendous. Gets that first win. Then you have a couple of block kicks, and even in the win, another kick was blocked. But I feel like at the very least, the quiet consistency of Cade York and the confidence might be coming back despite the blocks. Where are you at with that?
Oh yeah, I'm really confident in him. I think he's the least of the special team problems. He and the punter have actually had outstanding years. Cade York's like in the top 5 in points scored among kickers. And the blocks were a problem, and he had 2 misses prior to that. But I think as a rookie kicker, a lot's been asked of him. He's, the offense doesn't move in position far enough for those game-winning field goals. He's not going to make 61 and 58-yarders every game. He's not Justin Tucker just yet. So I think they're solid in place kicker and punter. Everything else is bad. And the return game, fumbling, they're giving up returns, and blocking in front of the kicker has been suspect. So they're not going to get where they want to go unless all 3 phases of the team get solidified. And the special teams, I probably have the least amount of confidence in seeing that happen. And that has nothing to do with Cade York or Bajorquez, the punter.
Yeah, those 2 spots are, for fans, you don't have to worry about that. The return game, though, Tony, everyone's going crazy over it, myself included. Since Travis Benjamin, nothing. What they can't, the Browns can never tackle tight ends, and they can't return the damn ball. I don't know why. Jakeem Grant was supposed to be it, and now you're just back to nothing.
Yeah, he popped his Achilles in training camp, and that was a big injury. That was a big pickup this year. He was going to, in the words of Mike Prefer, the special teams coach, he was going to transform the entire return game. And we're back to by committee, and Donovan Peoples-Jones is probably the best they have, and he's not going to return. It's just he's not going to put the ball on the ground like the others have.
Yeah.
And the kick returns have been kind of inconsequential because there's so many touchbacks. They're going to get Jerome Ford, the rookie, back after the break, who was handling kickoffs, but that's not his specialty. But he'll be fine back there. What teams return one every 6 kickoffs now, it seems. So that's not a huge part of the problem. The problem is everything else. Picking up a loose ball on a onside kick and stuff like that.
Oh. Like Tony, for Browns fans, other teams have, hey, I wonder if this, even for the Jets, like Berrios, I wonder if he's going to run it back. For the Browns, it's like, I hope they don't drop the ball. And the amount of face plants, why do they keep falling? I don't get it.
I know.
It's wild.
I know.
It's absolutely wild.
They tried that Charlie Rogers. No, not Charlie. Chester Rogers.
Chester Rogers, yeah.
And he face planted and he muffed in the same game, and now he's out of the picture, even though he's still on the practice squad. They can't call him up. He's out of elevation. So it's going to be Donovan Peoples-Jones or Demetric Felton, and they don't want to go back to Felton.
No, neither do I, Tony. Neither do I. So at this point in the season, coming out of the bye, do you see any situation where there is some sort of either coaching change or play calling change when it's Stefanski handing it off? Because really, Tony, what my vibe sort of is that this is you can call it stubborn, you can call it conviction to their beliefs, but it doesn't seem like they're too apt to make quick changes. What do you think?
Oh, no. Especially after listening to Andrew Berry on Tuesday, hearty endorsement to Kevin Stefanski as both the head coach and the offensive play caller. He feels he can manage the game. I don't see where the evidence is that he can call plays and still manage the game. I think they're terrible and situational parts of the game. They did well against Cincinnati at the end of the first half, to score that field goal and then to come and double dip to start the second half. But other than that game, they're terrible in those kinds of situations. But I don't see any coach getting fired. I've been insistent on that on our airwaves that nobody's going to get fired, and the head coach is going to continue to call plays and manage the game at the same time. Yeah,
and it might not be the best thing from our standpoint, but that's the way it is, and that's how it's going to continue. And off we go. Tony, always a pleasure. Tell people where, and I try to share as much of your stuff as possible. I read you every morning. Love it. But tell people where they can hear you, find you, and get all your great info.
Right. Well, every day I'm on our air on 8:50 a.m. WKNR ESPN Cleveland, usually at 10 a.m. and then later in the afternoon around 4 or 5. And all my writing is behind the paywall of our subscription site, thelandondemand.com. I have 2 different podcasts. One is the Daily Grossi, which is always unlocked. And also the 100 Years Pod once a week about the upcoming opponent, which is behind the paywall.
Yeah, and daily articles, fantastic info. And Tony, always a pleasure. Enjoy the rest of the bye week. Hopefully you get to have a couple rounds of golf or something in between.
Already done, Andy. Thank you.
Yes. All right.
Thanks
there he is. Thank you so much. There he goes. Tony Grossi on Twitter at Tony Grossi, ESPN Cleveland, landondemand.com. We're going to switch it up to some fantasy football and NFL betting in a moment. Want to get to a quick hashtag Ask Andy question. You have your fantasy football questions, get them in hashtag Ask Andy on Twitter at AndyMC81. From at Rob Reiner, not the famous producer, Reiner, says, Week 9 RB issues. Would love your thoughts on Rachaad White or Damian Harris. Is Pacheco even in the conversation? Hashtag Ask Andy. Rob, the answer on Pacheco is no. No Pacheco. We don't want Pacheco. I also don't want really Rachaad White. I know people are kind of, I'm not seeing it from a consistent level. Right now, even though you have Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris and him can both eat. It's sort of like a lesser version of Chubb Hunt. They can both eat. So in your specific scenario, stick with Damian Harris. We'll get to a lot more fantasy football questions, NFL betting tips with my next guest coming up in just a moment, Steffi Smalls from Champions Round. Big thank you to Tony Grossi from thelandondemand.com and ESPN Cleveland. All right, 6 teams on bye. What are we going to do? I got the answers for you on the betting side, on the fantasy side, and I'm going to bring in Steph Smalls from Champions Round right now. Steph, how are you?
Good. How are you? It's Friday. We have a fun week of football coming up. My Giants are on bye, so I can take a deep breath for a little bit and just enjoy some football.
Look, we're in the same boat. The Browns are on bye. It's kind of weird, right? Because I'm sure you're like me. It comes up and Friday hits, you get a little anxious, and Saturday you're a nervous wreck. Sunday you're like, I don't know, and then it whatever happens.
Yeah, exactly. So at least this time we get to enjoy a little bit of football without the nerves here.
Yes, and you know what? This allows us to hone in for ourselves, for the viewers, on the fantasy and betting side, right? It really allows us to focus into the meat of this thing. So when we're looking, let's start on the betting side because there's some interesting lines this week. And so we'll go through our favorite underdog, maybe an over-under spread type of deal. When you're looking at this week 9 slate, what jumps out to you? And let's maybe start with one of your favorite picks.
Yeah, one of the teams that I am so intrigued with, and I have been catching people are a little heated about this, but for some reason, these Atlanta Falcons keep winning games. They're going up against the Chargers, who have a horrific run D, and Atlanta's offense runs through the run. Quite literally, they're ranking 6th in EPA per drive. And I think Staley is really holding back these Chargers. They're without weapons here. And Atlanta's just finding ways to win. And that's the difference between good teams and bad teams, especially right now in the state of the league. So I kind of like that Falcons +3. I cannot see the Chargers going and lighting up the Falcons in the state that they're in, missing a lot of weapons, and an Atlanta team that's pretty frisky here.
Well, and you mentioned missing a lot of weapons. Keenan Allen ruled out earlier today. Mike Williams out. Eckler should play, but he's got some of his abdomen or something. And so really now what you're looking at wide receiver-wise is Josh Palmer, who I like, but he's coming off a concussion, and DeAndre Carter. And that's kind of it with Eckler. Like, I'm totally with you. Staley's made some horrific decisions, and they're losing in spite of themselves. So that's an interesting, especially on the road. And even traditionally, they're not a great road team.
Yeah, it's not. And they're just the Chargers are very conservative. This is a great get right place for them. Absolutely. But I like Atlanta until they start losing and proving they can't win games. There's something about this team that's just a little bit feisty. On paper, they really should not be winning the amount of games that they are, but they're figuring it out. They're finding a way, kind of similar to teams like Seattle, which is actually proven to be a very good football team, but also like the Minnesota Vikings. It's coming down to one possession and they're still winning there. Well, I don't like the spread on that game at all. I'm interested in this Falcons +3.
Well, and look, the Falcons beat my Browns, or should I say the Browns beat themselves earlier in the year. Ridiculous. You talk about bad coaching in game decisions. Insanity. But you know what? To your point, though, the Falcons, they are being coached well. And what are they doing? They're playing with Marcus Mariota, who, and I'm with you on your Seattle comparison. Him and Geno Smith, they're playing loose and free. They got nothing to lose. Geno Smith's 1 year out of being an analyst somewhere. Marcus Mariota's not far behind. So they're playing loose, free. For Atlanta, they're saying, hey, Marcus, remember when you used to run the ball some in Oregon? Remember how fun that was? And they're doing some RPO. So they're getting creative and getting it done. So I like that. I like that with the Falcons. And you know what? Really, why not? When you're looking at an underdog play, because there's some that jump out to me a little bit. Who do you like for an underdog?
Interesting here. I think if we're talking straight up, Seattle does obviously jump off the paper. Feels a little bit trappy for me. I'm too scared to take the Carolina-Cincinnati game. Is very, very interesting to me. I think the way I've decided to play this game is I like the over here. I like that over 42. Yeah. I don't blame people that want to take the +7.5. I don't think that Cincinnati has proven that you should trust them. They're coming off a bad loss at home. A lot depends on that O-line. The play calling's been a little weird lately. They're a very physical defense, but Carolina's frisky right now. And PJ Walker, again, very much like these other guys you just named, he's got nothing to lose. He's going, he's playing, he's just going to play ball. Running back Foreman's pretty good, putting a little bit of life back into this team. And I like their defense, that kind of runs through Derrick Brown and Burns there. And I think Burns can apply pressure to Burrow that maybe gets this game going. So I like this game to be pretty high scoring. Not sure if I'm adventurous enough to take that +7.5. I know a lot of people are on that this week, but I think the best for that game is probably to play the over.
The over is interesting. And look, if PJ Walker, if it doesn't work out, he's a former XFL MVP. He can go right back, starting up again.
There you go. Exactly.
Come on back, PJ. It's all good. But no, he's playing good. Fantasy-wise, to tie that in, Chuba Hubbard will not play. So Donta Foreman, you can light him up. That's going to be a nice RB2 type of situation. You can put him in there. And so here's, I totally agree on taking the over the 42.5 because things could get a little sloppy. Cincinnati's defense, they got a couple defensive guys banged up as well. I'm going to say I'm one of the guys who is going to take the 7. And the reason, Steph, is this. Last year, the Browns put the boots to the Bengals, which I always love. That Denzel Ward 99-yard pick 6. This past Monday, they did it again. Now, what happened last year? After that game, that flipped some sort of switch in Cincinnati, and they went on their run to the Super Bowl. I think they still have the offensive pieces, even without Jamar Chase. You're still stacked to be able to do that. So that's why I think if we're going off of what happened last year in a similar situation, that they could take over.
Yeah, I'm with you. Absolutely. And I think that's why I do think going over that 42, like maybe I know my coworker is very in on, the Bengals scoring 30 plus points independently this game. So I think that's why I'm so in on this total, because I think this team ends up just all over each other.
Yeah. And if it's sloppy, it's great. And, in conversation with Steph Smalls on Twitter at Steffi Smalls, doing a great job with at Champions Round. You can follow them on Twitter also. Okay. So we went the over under sort of underdog favor. Is there a spread that jumps out? We talked about that Bengals one that might be a little iffy. Does any spread specifically, like, man, I know the Bills and Jets 11.5. I don't know about you, Steph, but whenever it hits that double digit in the NFL, I just get a little tentative.
Yeah, you're just like me. I think especially this late into the season too. Like that's a lot of points. Even that Chiefs Titans game for me is a little bit too many points there. Last night I had Houston that plus 14 because it was just too many points right now. And especially in an NFL where a lot of teams are underperforming. But I do think that the one team that isn't underperforming is the Bills. So I do kind of lean towards the Bills here. I like them straight up. I think that we saw what happened with the Packers. A lot of people lost a lot of money there on that 10.5 last week. But my issue with the other side of the ball there is Zach Wilson is just so indecisive in the pocket, and he's making seriously critical mistakes. He's 30th out of 35 QBs in EPA, and I think that Buffalo is just gonna put it on him. So I like the Bills in this situation. Division
rival. Steph says stomp on the Jets. Goes Buff stampede over the Jets. This is one game I want to stay completely away from, Rams and Buccaneers. Steph, I just like this game. Okay, Bucks are 3-point favorites, 42.5. These two teams, it is so crucial for each of these clubs right now, but you can't put a finger on why, at least to me, why we would be able to trust and say, oh yeah, Tom Brady. I think we're getting beyond the point where it's like, Tom will just figure it out. I think Father Time might be knocking.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's funny because they probably thought they were very witty putting this game together when they put the schedule together, not knowing that both of these teams were going to come up as two of the biggest disappointments. The Rams are they are not a good football team right now. Interesting. I lean Tampa Bay here. I think if you're looking at both sides, the O-line is probably what would hurt them there, but I don't know what's going on with either of these teams. Probably staying away from this game. If I had to lean, it would be towards Tampa Bay, and probably lower scoring. I mean, these teams are not scoring a lot of points, both sloppy in a lot of ways. So it'll probably have to be Tampa Bay's defense that wins them this game, or maybe Brady finally figures it out, but not an super exciting game here.
No, and the problem is whenever in fantasy or in betting, Steph, when we have to keep saying, if this happens, or if there's too many ifs, you stay away. Yeah. Too many ifs. Right. We don't want ifs. We want some clarity. One game, and it's not a big, money line or anything like that, but I think just a straight up win. I like the Jags over the Raiders. Yeah. Why am I not? Why would I trust Derek Carr? And the biggest, Devontae Adams has been the biggest impact player negatively to the Packers and non-impact, not his fault, on the Raiders side, just affecting two teams so drastically. I don't want to trust the Raiders. Jaguars aren't great either, but I can at least see from their coaching an upward trajectory a little bit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I loved when I did a underdog parlay. I put the Falcons and the Jags together. I don't know when you look at those games why you could tell me that either of those teams should be blowing out the other one. I don't trust the Raiders just as much as I don't trust the Chargers right now. I definitely don't trust the Raiders coming off of getting blown out by the last week. So I'm with you there. I like the Jags straight up. Don't really like that. I think is it still a 1.5 probably. The Raiders I don't know what's going on over there. I think a lot of that is probably coaching because again, you look at it on paper, Raiders should be better. But I think a lot of people bet and they're thinking about last year or they're looking at a lot of trends where I think people are getting hurt this year because this is it's been a different season than we've seen in the past. So these trends aren't exactly true. There's some trends I like for example, I like the New England -5.5 because coming down to these two teams, while I don't trust Mac Jones, and I don't think, last week they won that game because of their defense and because Zach Wilson played the way that he played. But the Colts are kind of just trying to stay afloat. They benched Matt Ryan, then they fired their OC, and it just things are all over the place. And what do we know? We know that Bill Belichick, he can beat rookie quarterbacks. This is Sam Allen. This is his second career start. So I like New England -5.5, probably my favorite spread of the week. I can't trust the Colts right now. While I like them, I think that they got to start crumbling down soon. And I think we've seen that start.
Yeah, that one really jumped out to me too. And not just Bill Belichick against rookie quarterbacks. 6th round, and we're not talking Tom Brady 6th round. 6th round 2021 Sam Ehlinger. They're going to make him try to throw because he can run a little bit, so they'll pin him.
Yeah.
And then the Patriots can just run with their 2 stud running backs. I think this is probably, I'm with you, the safest line going. And Ehlinger, you might fantasy-wise, I think you still play Pittman, because he's going to volume. But other than that, you know what, for the Colts, actually, we should say with Jonathan Taylor out, what are you thinking about some Deion Jackson? I know we were tweeting about that earlier. Little DJ on the bye. Let's go.
I like Deion Jackson rest of the season. My worry with this week is he has a very tough matchup. New England does not give up a lot of points to fantasy running backs. Will the volume be there where he will still have, I don't know that you can confidently say he's going to get you a ton of points, which I think it's being kind of embellished that he's this darling right now where that probably is the case the rest of the season because of the situation he's in. But this week, he might end up being a slight disappointment. Am I still going to start him? Absolutely. A lot of people don't have an option here. But I think that he still has a tough matchup, and I think that is getting overlooked slightly.
Yeah, I wish it was an easier matchup because otherwise it would be an absolute smash spot there. Smash. Let's get to a couple fantasy questions before we let you go there, Steph. So this one coming in from @NF Tyrone24 says, I need one of these 2 receivers, Gabe Davis, Jacoby Myers, and 2 running backs between A.J. Dillon, Eno Benjamin, and Nyheim Hines. Funny enough, from the Colts, now with Buffalo. It's a tough one this week, he says. Thanks in advance. So let's start with the wide receivers. Gabe Davis or Jacoby Myers. And Steph, with me, I'm kind of, and you mentioned sort of last year trends and stuff, I'm kind of conditioned to think Jacoby Myers doesn't score touchdowns and is terrible at fantasy. But when you look, last couple of weeks, he's been pretty good.
Not the case. He's actually been playing fantastic. And I think that he's that main target there. I prefer the running backs on that team. But again, you're so used to thinking, oh, don't start Jacoby Myers. There's something to it. My problem is with Gabe Davis. And it's funny because I got a question that was exactly like this on my show this week. And my issue with Gabe Davis is wherever you took him in the draft was probably a little bit higher than most people would have been comfortable with. And he can get you a ridiculous amount of points in 2 plays. He does not need a lot. It's very hard for me to say, don't start Gabe Davis. If you want to play it safe, I think that Jacoby Myers is a little bit higher of a safe option. I don't want to say, but Gabe Davis's floor, I think, is just what could happen in that game. I lean Gabe Davis here.
Yeah, you're totally right. Where it's man, it's so tantalizing, and people because of that historic playoff performance, which is still ridiculous, and. He does, and Jacoby does give that safer floor. So it depends on your risk tolerance. Now, when we look at the running back, this is ugly for our friend NF Tyrone 24 here. A.J. Dillon in Green Bay, the Packers. Eno Benjamin, who I kind of have a soft spot for with the Cardinals, but he hasn't necessarily popped. And Nyheim Hines, to me, I'm wiping Nyheim Hines right off. A nice real-life piece fantasy-wise.
Yeah.
We can't count on Nyheim Hines.
Yeah, I think my lean here, like automatically, is actually AJ Dillon. And while I think that the Packers have been very disappointing, I think AJ Dillon has definitely been disappointing. I can imagine that wherever you drafted him, you are not happy with the performance you are getting. But they're playing the Detroit Lions, who give up a ton of points to their opposing running back. So I lean AJ Dillon here. The Seahawks are not bad against the run there. So I think I would lean AJ Dillon. Is Eno probably safer? Probably, but we're starting to get over the hump here. So let's go for some points. Let's try to
get nuts.
Let's get weird with it. You're not in a good spot anyways, so you're kind of throwing darts regardless.
Yeah, if you're in a dart throw thing, if you pick Hines, you're getting 6 points. You might as well go get a little crazy. Let's go with Dart. Let's go. Let's do one more. From Robert F. Gray 1 was offered a trade. So trade question here.
Okay.
Taylor, so I believe Jonathan Taylor, McLaurin, and DJ Moore for Justin Jefferson and DeAndre Swift. Here's the twist. Keeper league, and I cannot keep Justin Jefferson after this season, would have to keep Jonathan Taylor. This is a lot of moving parts here. So Jonathan Taylor, McLaurin, DJ Moore. For Justin Jefferson, DeAndre Swift. Rob has to keep Taylor if he gets him and cannot keep Justin Jefferson. That's a lot going on.
Yeah, it is a lot going on. So I do think people are writing off Taylor a little bit too quickly. He was getting drafted as the overall running back once, in some places the 101 entirely, depending on the league that you're in and who you're playing against. So I think everyone's a little quick to just write him off. Obviously everyone knows that does follow me, very big Justin Jefferson fan. While he has been slightly disappointing, not scoring as many touchdowns as we would have hoped, I think the Vikings will get hot. McLaurin and DJ Moore are interesting pieces because I think a lot of their production comes from who is throwing them the ball. I'm torn here, and DeAndre Swift is not quite living up to what we wanted. What side would I go here?
Yeah,
I might lean I'm leaning the Jonathan Taylor side because you couldn't keep JD.
Right. And the thing is too, I would rather err on the side of the running back, the RB1, because you're right. It's an ankle. We're not talking. He's not blowing out significant joints or anything like that. He didn't forget how to be a good running back. The Colts can readjust, and longer term, you can do it. Then for your guy Justin Jefferson, and I'm a big. I love Jefferson.
Yes. I
think that addition of TJ Hawkinson, real life and fantasy wise, huge. Because
absolutely.
Like Adam Thielen, he's not really a threat anymore. KJ Osborne, I like, but he couldn't. Now you have Hawkinson, and now you can get. I think Jefferson's going to pop. With this addition.
And you look at people are so quick to be like, oh, JT's blah blah blah. Also, Saquon and CMC have come back and proven to be able to just still be an elite talent. JT can still do that. So is it right now probably a little bothersome to make this trade because you're like, you might not get that much out of JT. You can keep him next year. I'm all for it. So I think I like the JT side.
Steph, you've been super considerate with your time. Thank you so much. Tell people where they can find you, hear you, watch, all that good stuff.
Yes, you guys can find me over at Champions Round. We also are an app. If you like gambling, we have a ton of fun micro betting games over there. You guys can find me on Twitter at Steffi Smalls with 3 L's, constantly posting my stuff. And again, you can find everything over at Champions Round. You do a great job, Steph. Thank you so much. Let's do it again soon. See ya. All right, there she is. Steph Smalls, great insight there. I got a couple more fantasy plays for you before we say goodbye, everybody. So as we said, Deion Jackson. So some news, Deion Jackson in for Jonathan Taylor. Not a great matchup, but he's there. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams both out for the Chargers. Josh Palmer's the play there. A guy I really like. We talked a little bit about the Lions, but a guy I really like this week. Probably my top streaming play. And on the waiver wire, still available in 98%, people. 98% availability still in most leagues. Khalif Raymond of the Lions. Everyone wants to talk Amon-Ra St. Brown, and you should. I love Amon-Ra St. Brown. DeAndre Swift. Khalif Raymond is the guy. Why? Well, because he has jumped over Josh Reynolds, who's also banged up, as the number 2. He led the Lions in receiving yards last week.
And TJ Hawkinson is gone to Minnesota, so he's going to get more opportunity. Khalif Raymond, if you are in bye week trouble, if you want a DraftKings play, a quick play there, who's cheap, I think he's $4,000 on DraftKings. It makes a lot of sense for DFS, makes a lot of sense for a desperation flex. If you're there, quarterback, I love Justin Fields. On DraftKings, he's in that kind of third level pricing tier. So you can pop him in and save some money on your DraftKings lineup. Then go with some bigger stars, whatever. Available still in about either 42% in Yahoo leagues, about 40% in ESPN leagues. Here's why I like Justin Fields. Facing Miami, he's given up the 7th most fantasy points to quarterbacks. 166 rushing yards Miami's given up to Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So I like him there. He's had 7 total touchdowns in his past 4. 76.7 rushing yards over his past 3. And you get Chase Claypool. Now, how much room does Chase Claypool get this week? Hard to say, but I think eventually those two can connect and have a really nice 1-2 young athletic impact. That's Justin Fields' guy where you can throw it up and say, go get him. Claypool, you can match him up, line him up anywhere. We've seen the flashes, and you get Fields ascending right now over the last 3 weeks. So more confidence, more play time for Claypool. I'm sure he's going to be the top target. Who else? They got Mooney. By the way, I told you preseason, don't go for Darnell Mooney. Hopefully some of you listen. Get your questions in on Twitter at AndyMC81. You can use hashtag AskAndy for fantasy, for betting. Remember, the Sick Podcast with me, Andy McNamara, talking Cleveland Browns, fantasy football, and betting every Tuesdays and Fridays right here on the Sick Media Network. So make sure you're giving the podcast a follow as well at Sick Pod Browns. That'll do it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Browns fans, we get to relax, watch some football. We'll be back Tuesday and start getting ready for the Dolphins. We'll see you next week.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Andy McNamara on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.